Good evening and welcome to the Doylestown Bookshop's virtual event series. My name is Chrissy and I am thrilled to welcome authors Christopher Paolini and Chuck Wendig as they discuss Christopher's new book, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. We have both of their books right here. They're big guys.
We're gonna get a workout from both of those.
They're big ones, but they're great. The authors will speak for about 30 minutes, and then I will moderate the Q&A portion of the event. You may submit your questions by clicking on Ask a Question at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to purchase additional copies of To Sleep in a Sea of Stars or Chuck's book Wanderers, which is now on paperback, please click on the Buy the Books Here button or visit us at www.doylestownbookshop.com. Christopher Paolini published his first novel, Aragon, in 2003 at the age of 19 and quickly became a publishing phenomenon. His inheritance cycle, Aragon, and its 3 sequels have sold nearly 40 million copies worldwide. To Sleep in a Sea of Stars is his first adult novel. Chuck Wendig is the New York Times bestselling author of Star Wars Aftermath, as well as the Miriam Black thrillers, the Atlanta Burns books, and Zeros and Invasive, along with other works across comics, games, film, and more. He was a finalist for the John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer and an alum of the Sundance Screenwriters Lab. He served as the co-writer for the Emmy-nominated digital narrative Collapsus. Now I'm going to give it over to our authors. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks
You're
for having
welcome.
us.
Thanks for being here.
And Chuck, thank you for agreeing to do this with me.
Oh my God, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me. This is so cool.
It is. We were just chatting before the call started that the first time we actually met in person was at Phoenix Comic-Con back in 2018. And the second time we met is today on this call.
Yeah, exactly. Digitally. It's not as hot here as it was in Phoenix. That was a little roasty toasty.
It sure was. And I grew up in Montana, so I don't do anything over about 78 degrees is boiling for me.
Yeah, you must have been just a pile of just hot Jello at that point, because that was
especially since I live in my leather jacket, at least at
God,
conventions.
Yeah, no, not there. You didn't catch fire. You're very lucky.
But I just want to thank everyone who's signed into this event. Thank you. It means a lot to me, and I'm very, very excited to be talking about To Sleep in a Sea of Stars and to finally have a new book being published after all these years. I mean, the last big one I did was 2011, which seems to be an unfortunate year in sci-fi fantasy, as that was the same year George R. R. Martin published his and Patrick Rothfuss. So I'm glad. Maybe.
You broke it. Yeah. So before we get into the book, the very big book that you wrote, I figured I should say, like, how's the pandemic going for you? Because things are a little different right now, obviously, as evidenced by the fact that we are doing this virtual thing here. How are you? Are you doing okay?
Well, I'm good. At the moment, It looks rather apocalyptic out my office window as we have wildfire smoke from California coming all the way up to Montana.
Yeah, we have it in Pennsylvania, so yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it makes for beautiful sunrises and sunsets, but everything in between is kind of miserable. As far as the pandemic goes, I grew up homeschooled, so staying at home and working and not going out a whole lot sort of reminds me of my childhood.
You're a writer. You're a writer, so
and I'm a writer. And fortunately, all my friends and family are safe, so that's all been good. But there have been a couple of close calls, so we're just hunkered down and doing what we can. And how about you? How about on your part of the world?
Yeah, same, hunkered down, and I'm naturally an introvert, and I work in this shed. So I literally built a shed to write in. So I stay here and stare out the window like there's zombies coming. Like, get away, don't come in.
Well, the way this year is going, I mean, who knows? Maybe the zombies will show up by December.
Yeah, November. Honestly, December will be something worse. Yeah. So okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's about ready. It's about time for the alien invasion.
Yeah, we've got but we're gonna have a surprise, like something we weren't expecting, like robots.
Right, right, like a wandering black hole comes through the system or something.
Yeah, just happens by. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and we have to fight our doppelgangers. Something really weird will happen. It's not going to be everything. It's going to be a curveball. So you wrote a huge book, and I say this having written what I felt was a really huge book, and then I get your book, and I'm like, oh my god, it's even bigger than Wander.
Yeah.
So before we even get into content, I have to ask. I know it's like 800 some pages with both of the addendum. How many thousands of words is this book? Because we live in a metric, right?
Yeah. So how many thousands of words is Wanderers?
280,000.
Okay, so yeah, To Sleep is 308,000. So it's a chunk.
Respect.
But in my defense, and I'm quite honestly, this is the limit of what I think I can or ever want to write in one book. But in its defense, and it's weird, I guess coming from the YA side of things, I have this weird thing of feeling like, oh, the book's not long enough, because a lot of times they use larger type to make the books feel longer. Yeah. And then I realized that, Dune is about 185,000 words long, and here I am at 308,000 words long. So I was like, yes, this is officially a big boy.
Yeah.
But in its defense, I was trying to do a complete story in one book, which is different from what I've done in the past. I wanted a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it really is 2 books in one, maybe even 3 books in one. But it is a complete story.
Yeah, I'm with you. That was the goal, to set up to write a complete unit. So, how do you keep it all together though? Because that's and again, I get it. I know it is really hard to keep what is essentially 300,000 words full of story contained and sensible, not just on fire. Just not a series of words crashing together and pile up on the highway.
Well, first of all, there's a chance that I haven't. I will have to see how people feel about it. But
no, you have Davey as one of your editors. She will not.
Oh yeah.
This I know if she let this go, this is a good book. That's what
Davey and Will was also co-editing on this, and they both did an amazing job. I had the strangest experience writing this book. Normally, when I edit my books, I drop 10 to 15% of the manuscript size over the course of the editing, minimum, 10 to 15%. Will and Davey had me add 30,000 words of content to this manuscript.
Oh, yes.
And a part of it is because I really went almost like in the CJ Cherry direction of trying not to overload the readers with information and letting the readers only experiencing things when the character themselves experience them. So if the characters have no reason to think of something or experience it, I just didn't mention it. And coming from the fantasy side of things, I wanted that cleaner approach. And it worked for the most part, but then Will and Davey rightly pointed out that there were places where that context really was needed. So there I was editing and pulling stuff out and shoveling stuff in at the same time. But as far as keeping it all straight, it was a challenge. And I had my assistant build me a personal wiki, which I throw everything in there. I keep track of it that way. And you don't need a wiki. If anyone's watching this as an aspiring writer, you don't need a wiki. What I end up doing, what I did before was just, MS Word documents. I'd have one for people, places, things, one for the plot and notes, and then maybe one for languages if that was appropriate, or ecology or biology or whatever else might have been in there. But you have to. I'm really. It's the fact that you asked that question tells me you've been there. You have to keep track of this, because unless you have a brain like a machine, you're going to forget stuff, especially if you're working on stuff for years.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing. You've got a book here that has a series of addendum. It has a glossary, and it has scientific explanations and in character, in world stuff.
Yeah.
And so did a lot of your wiki stuff and a lot of your research, then did you sort of port that cleanly to the addendum? Is that sort of how you, because it also keeps
other way around. I never waste time writing stuff for the wiki when I could be writing stuff for the book. So what I do is I write the stuff in the book and then I port it over into the wiki. But I heard from the amazing Jennifer Hale, who did my audiobook, and our viewers may know her from such things as FemShep in the Mass Effect games, or Halo series, or Metal Gear Solid, or Overwatch, or she's been Disney's voice of Cinderella for years. She did Galadriel in the Lord of the Rings games, and I am so incredibly lucky to have her.
Yeah, you're doing an event with her, right?
I am. It's going to be a lot of fun. But she told me that there were 50 uniquely voiced 53 uniquely voiced characters in the book, and she had to come up with a completely different voice and accent for all of them, and she did it.
Oh my God!
So,
both a credit to her talent, your genius and madness. Really, your cruelty. Possibly, you're a cruel
cruelty.
man.
We'll go with cruelty.
Cruelty on that one. That's awesome. Wow, God, this is a huge book with so many unique voices and so many twisting plot lines. I mean, I'm only part of the way through it because it's huge, and it's great. It's amazing.
Thank you.
So, do you outline? I mean, or you just okay, you outline.
Yeah, I outline.
I mean, is it like a chunky outline, or is it quick and hasty?
No, it's pretty chunky. I just, the reason this book took me so long to write, and I talk about this in my afterword a little bit, is that I basically got rusty with my storytelling skills when working on the Inheritance Cycle, because it was over 10 years working on that series, and in that 10 years, although I had plenty of story ideas, I wasn't sitting down and working them out and plotting them. And so when I started To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, I'm not going to say cocky, but I was definitely overconfident of saying, well, I've had this success. I know what I'm doing. I can wing this to a degree. So I did sort of a rough outline, but I didn't have my detailed outline. And as it turns out, I really can't wing it, that my brain doesn't work that way. So I wrote a first draft, and I did several revisions on that first draft, and it just wasn't working. And so for me, I need to have a paragraph per major event or per even specific scene in my outline, explaining what that scene is doing, what those beats are doing, what the characters are doing, how the characters are changing and growing, and where it's all driving to. And I think the reason I got myself into trouble in the first place is that, and I've talked about this in some other interviews, is that writing YA provides a natural structure. Because if you're writing about adolescence or coming of age, you have a natural story structure.
Sure.
Yeah. The story ends when the character grows up, when they mature, when they reach the end of puberty, for example. But if you're writing about an adult lives have much less natural structure like that. And so trying to figure out what the structure was for my main character, who she was, and then what all of this was going to do to her and how she was going to react to it and what that would leave the readers with, that was the ultimate struggle with this story, and probably with most stories. So once I had that, then I could write the book. But until I had that, I was adrift in a sea of stars.
Okay. I see what you did there. That's cool. So, I mean, I always like to think of myself as a pantser by heart and a plotter by necessity. If I really don't have that outline, I'm like a person. Like, you ever go into a store or a room and you're like, I don't know why I came in here. Like, I'm just here left to wander. If I don't have that kind of outline, I feel a little bit lost.
Yeah.
So,
and I would love to be a pantser, because you get that initial idea, whatever it is, and you're full of energy for it. And it's like, I just want to sit down and write it, but I've had to force myself to learn that discipline of saying, you're going to get yourself into trouble. Stop, do the work beforehand, because you're going to end up doing it after if you don't. And I find rewriting very mentally difficult at times. So I'd much rather try to get it closer to the finished product the first time.
Is that what happened this time, or did you have to go through a lot? Because Wanderers for me was we did one big draft and a couple little tweaks and it was done. But my second book coming out with Del Rey, Book of Accidents, I'm on like draft 6. One of them was a robust hatchet job. It was just chainsaw, cutting through things. So how was this? It's huge. So
I finished the first draft at the beginning of 2016.
Okay.
And then I was trying to fix the first draft for 2016 and about 3/4 of 2017. And only then did I realize I couldn't fix it. And then it was, put it this way, I don't know how far you are into the book, but everything passed about a quarter of the way past the second section of the book, because the book's divided into sections. Everything past there was basically done from scratch.
Oh my gosh.
And the problem is writing books this big, and I really don't want to in the future, is that when you have to do these sorts of revisions, it just takes time. There is no way to write a 300,000 word book fast. Even if you're Stephen King, it takes time.
Yeah, it does. That's absolutely true. Just because of keeping it all in your head and then putting it all on the paper again and again and making it work. Absolutely. So, I mean, outside of process, outside of just the sheer rubber meets road kind of thing, where does this come from for you? I mean, I know it's like sort of a staid question, like where do your ideas come from?
Right.
But I find that every book is really its own unique creature, and it's possible that as you were writing this one, you're talking about you got rusty with your storytelling skills, but it's also, for me at least, the unfortunate and grumpy relearning that every book is its own animal, and they each are conquered and figured out in their own way. They're their own puzzle, and you just can't attack every book the same way. I learn every book that I don't know how to write books. And it's both a wonderful discovery by the time I'm done, but as I discover that for the first time again, I get very frustrated. So where does the core of this story come from for you? Why this book, and why now?
That what you were saying just reminds me of, I met Alan Dean Foster, the author, at San Diego Comic-Con one time. Yeah. And at the time, he had published something like, I don't know, I want to say like 120 some novels in his career, and I'm sure it's more at this point. And I had only had, I don't know, 2 or 3 under my belt at the time. So I went up to him and I said, I read some of your books growing up. I love them. Please tell me, does it ever get any easier? Now, he stops. We're in the middle of the crowd at Comic-Con. He stops in that crowd and just starts laughing. And he says, it never gets any easier. He says, you get a cool idea, you plot it out, you start writing, and you think this is going wonderfully, and you hit the middle of the book, and you think, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm never going to finish this. Everyone's going to find out I'm a fraud. And then you keep working, and someday you finish the book, and then you repeat.
Yep.
So yeah, that's been my experience. As far as To Sleep goes, the idea came to me in 2 parts. One was the inciting incident with my main character, Kira, and then the final scene and final image of the book. And everything else in this giant book was to justify those 2 scenes, was to provide the framework so that the final scene would have the emotional impact I wanted and convey the emotion I wanted. So, I mean, and both of those came from, my love of classical science fiction, everything from Hyperion to Dune to Alien to Babylon 5 to The Prisoner, and tons more. Ian Banks, all of it just sort of put in a blender, and then me telling the story I wanted to tell. So, people will notice lots of little nods. I got a ship name that will make some Ian Banks fans grin in the book, and I have a few nods here and there. And then as the story goes on, it really becomes something else.
Nice. Briefly, an Alan Dean Foster story to share. I was also at San Diego Comic-Con, and I was writing the first Star Wars book in my series Aftermath, and it was pre Force Awakens coming out. And because my book was leading up to Force Awakens, I was trying to, they wanted me to do tie-ins to the movie, but they also wouldn't tell me anything about the movie. They would just feed me like these little memes. And I'd be like, what's Jakku? I don't know what that is. And they're like, we can't tell you, but you have to put it in the book. I was like, okay. So
that's horrible.
I was having that like sort of secret clandestine try to negotiate. And then I meet him, and the first time I met him, he is literally just telling people on the floor the plot of The Force Awakens. I was like, no, none of this is good. I mean, but I need to know it. So I'm like trying to listen in. Like, what is he saying? So that was like he was just a big boisterous. He didn't care. It was amazing.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny you mentioned The Force Awakens, because when I finished the first draft of To Sleep, I spent a winter split between Edinburgh and Barcelona, and gosh. I saw The Force Awakens all by myself in this amazing 4K IMAX style theater in Edinburgh. There was a laser projector. It was awesome. All by myself. There was literally like one other person. Well, maybe one other person in the theater. It was a weird time of day when I saw it, and it was just a weird and awesome experience. And then it was like 2 weeks later, I was in Barcelona, and I finished the first draft, and in this half-heated apartment, and here I am now. That was 2016. 4 years later, I get to finally talk about the book.
I know. It feels like longer, I'm sure. Seriously, that's a big journey. So, okay, that's a good lead-in, because Star Wars is, viewed as ostensibly space opera, and I've seen this book referred to as space opera, and that's not. I mean, I get it, but also the science is more rigorous in this than you would expect. I mean, space opera, obviously, Jedi is like, it's magic, right? I mean,
I love that you bring this up, because I did an event yesterday with Tad Williams, and he brought up this exact same point.
Okay.
No, it's really interesting, because this might be a generational thing too with space opera and how I viewed it growing up versus other definitions. I think the reason I have called this book space opera. You're right. The science is much more rigorous than, let's say, Star Wars. But to me, I wanted an almost mythological feel to this story, at least, especially by the time you get to the end of it. And that's not something I associate with like, really, really hardcore sci-fi. Like, I mean, I can think of a couple of examples here, but, so that to me was kind of the dividing line, is like, where does the story ultimately slot, even if the science is realistic? And that was a goal of mine, was to prove, at least to myself, that I could keep the science realistic and still tell the sort of story I wanted within a realistic setting.
Yeah, it definitely has that kind of, I don't want to say gritty, but it has that real, it cleaves to a real feel like Expanse does, but then still has that epic cut of space opera. So it's just a new genre. You just figured a whole new thing. I wouldn't say that. I would say you pioneered a whole new thing.
Well, I just loved figuring out the science, though. That was a blast. I actually spent a whole year on that.
You've got a whole bit on that in the book, in the addendum, that's about your journey. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? That's like a big deal.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the thing is like with world building, my experience, and I don't know about yours, you tell me, is that whenever there's something that is easy to gloss over, like you gloss over it because it's inconvenient for the story you want to tell.
Right. You just like hand wave it, go.
Right. That if you actually burrow into that inconvenient part, that's where you get the most interesting world building stuff, instead of trying to ignore it. So honestly, if I'd really wanted to go in that direction, I would have said there's no FTL in my universe, and I would have committed to that. But I wanted FTL, that's my magic. But what I really didn't want was for it to allow, so I didn't want to use a system that had been used by someone else in some major franchise or any franchise I was aware of. And I didn't want to contradict physics as we know it, which is almost impossible, but I tried. And then the big one was I didn't want time travel.
I read that. I'm like, yes, good.
Yeah, because basically every FTL system allows for that, and
you get that loophole.
And yeah, I mean, you can wave it away and just say it's not possible, and here's a bit of technobabble. I was hoping for it's still technobabble, but a slightly more realistic bit of technobabble for why that's not allowed. And let's just say I managed to maintain relativity, but I expanded the set of causal ordered events, and that allows me to do what I needed to do. But it was fantastic. I found a scientist who works in the space industry, who has done a lot of work on a theoretical physics model, Gregory Mahalik. And he very kindly sort of held my hand and walked me through his theory that he and some other people have worked on. And that formed the basis for the FTL drive. And it is unique for me because, when the spaceships are actually traveling in FTL, they have nowhere to shed their waste heat. So that puts a real limitation on how far you can go and whether or not your crew can be awake. So usually this gives an actual reason for putting crews into cryogenic sleep. And then on top of that, there's this whole superluminal realm that we can't directly access, which is lots of fun to think about and play around with. So it's not something I dump on readers. If anyone's watching is worried, there's no technical stuff dumped on the readers. It's in the back of the book, but
it's on the back. It's good.
Yeah, it provides.
Yeah,
it's some fun stuff.
Yeah, it's like in writing, a lot of this stuff is kind of like in a house. It's like behind the walls. It's the pipes and the condos, and all that. But it's it's nice to see. I mean, it's weird. It's like nice to see the work. It's like with mathematics, like you showed your work in this. So
yeah, well, I wrote the whole book and I didn't have the appendices, and then I was in editing, and I sent an email along to Davey, my editor, and Will, and I said, how would you guys feel about some end material? I have a couple of ideas. And they said, oh yeah, you just whatever you're interested in doing. And so in like a week, I just dumped this on them. And I am afraid that the poor copy editor, when they're trying to edit, this faux physics paper, and they tweaked a couple of commas, but other than that, they were just hands off.
Just like roll with it. Just roll.
That's right.
That's good. This is cool. So like, you've got this. I mean, this is your current point in your career, but like you started writing at what is honestly a pretty ridiculously early age. I mean, you were the first book at 19, but I mean, obviously you had taken time before that to actually write it, so you were writing even earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what have you learned? I mean, you're like you're very like a rare sort of a rare avis in that you've got this kind of massive life between the anchor points of these massive books.
Yeah, it's looking back on it, honestly, as I've gotten older, I've really come to appreciate what an unusual experience it was. And I didn't understand how unusual it was when I was going through it, because how could I? I had nothing to compare it to. And now I kind of shake my head, and I understand how I understand how other authors were looking at me at the time, because I'm like, I kind of want to just, smack myself upside the head and say, you don't understand what's going on. But it was an amazing.
It's good you did not.
That too.
It's much easier to not understand what's going on.
But it was an amazing experience. I mean, what have I learned? I mean, I've learned how to speak in public, how to promote, how to travel. I've learned a lot about the writing. My writing's a lot cleaner now. I just have a lot more technical control over it. Is it perfect? No, but I'm hoping to keep growing and learning as I go along. I have a much better chance of accomplishing what I'm trying to accomplish now than I did when I started. It was much more haphazard, of course. So, writing's one of those things like any of the arts where you never master it. Doesn't matter how good you get, there's always better. And that's incredibly frustrating, but it's also stimulating and exciting because it's not boring.
Yeah, the top of the mountain is never immediately within reach. You're always
No, and I think it's possible to write a perfect sentence or a perfect paragraph, or maybe even a perfect short story. But past that, I think perfection becomes elusive, because we only have so much creative energy and physical energy, and it ends up like too little butter spread over too much toast as you go along sometimes.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And a novel by its nature is kind of just a messy entity, and sometimes in a good way. I mean, if you control it and you handle it well, that mess is part of the charm. A short story is like a single bullet, whereas like a novel is just a crazy like machine gun. You're hoping you hit something as you
pretty much. Well, and this one is this one sort of is setting up a whole universe too. This is the first book in what I'm calling the fractal verse, which is going to be, the fractal verse includes the real world as well as the distant past, the far future, and the present day.
Ooh, okay.
And so anything I want to write that's not explicitly fantasy can fit within the fractal verse.
Okay.
And in fact, I'm actually wearing a shirt with the fractal verse logo on it.
Oh, look at that.
Which is going to be available soon. I actually have a pin with the logo, which folks can find on my Etsy store, among other things. And in fact, Badali Jewelry, which does stuff for Sanderson and Rothfuss, and they're awesome. They've done 2 beautiful pendants, one in brass and one in silver, with the Fractalverse logo. So if folks are interested in a collector's item, they should seek that out. In fact, even the book itself in the US, we have the hardcover here, has the logo.
Oh, look at that. See, I just have the art. I don't have any fancy logo. No.
Well, then you're missing out on the gorgeous end paper art.
Oh,
and
my gosh. Yeah.
There are 7 pieces of art in this book. My assistant did a good chunk of them. I did a couple of them. So yeah, it's been a labor of love.
So, but this story is a complete story, but then you'll continue to kind of, in a fractal way, I guess, kind of continue to build out. Is that the
exactly idea? That's exactly the idea. It's to, just to play. I think the original urge, and my sister and I developed this universe together, and the original urge was that driving this was that I'd put so much work into developing the world for the inheritance cycle that when you do that amount of work, it's really not worth it for one book, quite honestly. So, I mean,
that investment needs to be deep. Yeah,
it is. And so this way it's a setting I can play with. And there are a lot of stories I'm going to tell in the real world and also, full far future. And this way things can tie together. They can build to something greater. And I think readers will enjoy seeing those little connections and stuff.
Cool.
At least that's the hope.
Yeah, but in fantasy work will continue to be theoretical inheritance stories.
Yeah. I mean, there'll probably be some stuff that's standalone, but I, have a lot of stories I want to tell in that world also.
Nice. What attracts you to fantasy and sci-fi? Like, what is the kind of the call to you about that?
Boy, that's a good question. I'd be curious to hear your answer on this too. Basically, that I think the stories are more interesting in this genre. I mean, I love stories about people, so I'll read anything, and if it's good, it's good. But I think my my love for the genres come from the fact that they're open to exploring ideas and emotions in ways that are often hard to find elsewhere. And speculative fiction allows you to externalize things that are otherwise internal, whether those are societal issues or personal issues. I mean, a very crude example would be if you have a character who's scared of spiders in a fantasy novel or sci-fi novel, you can have them run into a giant spider and actually have to confront that fear. So in some ways, it is able to make metaphors real in a way that would sort of ruin your enjoyment of a story if it were more realistic fiction.
Right. I'm with that. I'm like my initial answer, as a kid being attracted to it would just because, well, it's fun and different and it takes you away from this boring rock we live on. But as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate that it really is a great place to sort of contextualize and grapple a lot of weirder, squirrelier, like you say, ideas and emotions, weird feelings and weird things you see in the world, and you find a new way to metaphorically deal with them. I often say about Wanderers that it was an act of almost like a sorcerer summoning a demon into the summoning circle where you can control them. I felt like a place to summon. That's where I can summon the demons, and I can deal with them there instead of letting them run rampant in my head.
Well, and if you think about it, all of the oldest stories that humanity tells are essentially fantasy or mythological, and I mean, it's like even something like Alien. I often say that you can compare Alien to Beowulf very successfully in that, here we have characters huddled around the campfire while the monster prowls around in the darkness. It's it may be the oldest story of humanity.
Yeah, it's fundamental.
And
that's true.
Yeah, and you can tell it in almost any setting. So stories are how we make sense of the universe around us.
That's a good, there you go. I like that. All right. I think we have do we have 13 questions? Is that what I'm seeing?
We do have 13 questions.
That's a lot of questions. We should start
let's dive into them.
Q&A. It's always fun.
And I'm back.
Hello, and you're back.
Hi. All right, so let's dive into these questions. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, the first one, and this is for both of you. What are your top books from 2020, and what are you reading now?
Ooh.
Go for it. That's a hard one, but go for it.
I honestly am shamefully behind on my reading for this year because of all the time I've been spending editing and writing. But recently I did read The Doors of Eden by Adrian Tchaikovsky and quite enjoyed the different ideas there. I'm trying to think what else. I also recently read A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. And I'm trying to think what else has been in my reading pile recently. I'm currently reading a book on prose style that I can't remember the name of. So,
let's see. Boy, what are the? Samantha Irby. If you need something funny, Wow, No, Thank You is just a hilarious collection of essays. If you want one of those books that feels frighteningly prescient, people wearing masks and pandemics and world-ending stuff. Laura Lamb's Goldilocks was pretty phenomenal. If you want to be also very upset, Paul Tremblay's Survivor Song, which is about a rabies mutation that turns into a pandemic. There's a lot of pandemics going on right now in and out of fiction, and that he's like a guy who will just stab you, like if you're all the parts. And what am I reading now? All the Good Indians. That's what I'm reading now.
Is that who's the author on that
Graham
one?
Jones? Yeah, Stephen Graham Jones.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I'm thinking about all those dystopian sci-fi movies and pieces of concept art where you'd see people in the future. They're always wearing, masks or something for some reason. Like, well, gee, now we have an explanation.
Oh no! Yeah. Oh no! Oh no!
All right. For both writers, what are your favorite stay-at-home activities when you're not writing?
Spending time with my family, exercising because I sit so much, video games, drawing, art, walking if it's not too smoky outside, sometimes some metalworking, just anything that's not writing.
What video games? Do you mind if I ask? Just curious.
I'm a devoted fan of things that go boom in video games. So I do like shooting things. I've been I've been playing Far Cry 5 a bit obsessively because it's set in Montana and it perfectly captures the light and feel. I just played through Far Cry Blood Dragon again because that's the best Far Cry. But I love the Mass Effect series. I actually love the old Myst video games, but it's hard to find games like that these days.
It is. It is.
How about you?
Yeah, video games for me too. I'm going through Ghosts of Tsushima now, which is like just gorgeous game.
Yeah.
Photography, like I just it's a great way to get sort of out of my head because it's very easy in this current era to live in your head. So and even if I don't have the camera, I just go and look at birds because birds don't care about what's going on with us. They just don't care. And I mean, it's nice to sometimes be reminded that sometimes things don't care about us. So that's what I do.
Have you guys played Red Dead Redemption?
2. I haven't played the first one. Yeah, I played the second one.
Okay. I
I
played
haven't.
both of them during the pandemic. I never really played video games, and I'm like, that is my life now.
Yeah, it could literally be your life. There's a lot. Yeah.
I told one of the book buyers, I was like, can you order me this book that's like a Red Dead player guide, but don't let anyone else at work see it.
That's great. Not for me.
I see a comment here. If you like Mass Effect, you would 100% like Dead Space. I have played Dead Space. I haven't finished the second one yet.
Yeah, I only played the first one, but it was good. Oh, No Man's Sky is awesome. Lindsay, I agree with you.
Yeah, I've been holding off on like Elite Dangerous or Star Citizen because I do want to write my next book. So
yeah, that's
same thing with like Eve Online or Dwarf Fortress. If I start playing those, it's I'm gone. I'm dead. I'm done.
Yeah, we saw the last of you.
Okay,
Exactly.
this one is for yes, Skyrim, absolutely. For Christopher, how long have you been working on To Sleep in a Sea of Stars?
Well, I got the idea for it back in 2006, 2007, and then I started working on it seriously, I want to say end of 2013, beginning of 2014. I've been working on it since. So about 7 years or so.
Wow. Okay. And this is for both authors. How has where you live or where you grew up influenced your writing?
Well, I live in a place that kind of basically looks like the mountains from where like the riders of Rohan are in Lord of the Rings. So I'm very, very fortunate, and it influenced me a lot when it came to writing fantasy. And it continues to inspire me because it's so beautiful and it's a wonderful place to live in the middle of a pandemic. So all of those things play into it.
What about you, Chuck?
Yeah, I'm here in Pennsylvania. So, I don't know. Pennsylvania for me is like Maine to Stephen King. Like I grew up here and there was a lot of weird stuff, just weird, both like in terms of like creepy weirdos and also ghost stories and folklore. So I start Wanderers begins kind of right here. So it's just one of those things. I wanted an origin point for that.
Yeah, I've never written anything set in Montana. Maybe I should do that.
You totally should.
Yeah. And annoy everyone who lives around here, saying, "Hey, what did he do writing about here? What did he say?"
Exactly. Be like, too bad.
It's like was it Rick Berman? I forget. One of the producers on Star Trek was actually from, I think it was Billings, Montana, or Bozeman, Montana, and that's why in Star Trek: First Contact, Zefram Cochrane is actually in Montana, and that's where First Contact happens.
Oh my God, that's crazy! I didn't know that. Okay.
Hey, and Arrival happened in Montana also, supposedly.
Oh, see?
So I guess the aliens are coming here.
Yeah, they just found like they're coming to you. It's your fault.
Okay, this one is for Christopher. What made you want to ultimately create the Fractalverse versus a more self-contained book?
Because life does not end when a story ends, and I think as we get older we learn that. I mean, our personal stories all have ends, but life itself continues. At least it hopefully continues. And as I said, when I put in this amount of work into creating a universe, I always get more ideas for stories that would fit within that universe. And I didn't want to stop with just one book.
Okay, this is for Chuck and Christopher. Favorite character you've written in your new books and why?
You want to tackle that, Chuck?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, In Wanderers, there's a rock and roll musician, Pete Corley, and Pete is like, I always really like writing those characters where I don't know what they're going to do next, because when they defy any outlining or any plans I have, that usually means they're going to surprise the reader if they've surprised me. And so he's like one of those forces of chaos, just like sort of a narrative tornado. Like anything I've set up to be a careful orchestration, he comes in with his own motives and ideas, and it doesn't matter anymore, and he just wrecks it. And that's always fun to me to watch those characters lay waste to your plans and desires.
I always wonder why I never managed to make one of those characters my main character.
Yeah, right. I did that with Miriam Black, and that's it. It'll hurt you to do it, but it's fun.
I think it's probably because they tend to completely disrupt the narrative that you're trying to tell.
It's
so
cruel.
I have a character like that into Sleep. It's I'm not sure how much I should say, but I'm going. Yeah, so it's this character named Grigorovich, who is a ship mind, and a ship mind is not an AI in my universe. And Grigorovich is sort of a force of chaos and madness, as you said, and just absolute delight for me to write. And I've been hearing feedback that people have enjoyed reading him as much. And I've never revealed this before, but the weird thing is the reason I got his name is when I first got my first white hair in my beard. And the family was kind of making fun of me for it. So I just went, oh, what the hell? So I named the white hair Grigorovich. And when I was writing the book and I needed a name for a character, I was completely lost. I said, oh, I'll just call him Grigorovich. And that's where the name came from. So, and people ask where authors get their ideas.
I know. They shouldn't ask us.
They shouldn't.
Should not ask us. I know. Like, was it beard hair? Like, what? Okay, I don't talk to him anymore.
All right, this one is for Christopher. Coming from when you were younger to now, well, actually for Chuck too, how has your writing process changed or not changed?
Ooh. You want to tackle that, Chuck?
I mean, I don't know. Like I said, it's tricky because every book is its own thing, and I always think I know how to write a book, and like writers are really good at internalizing their own writing advice. And I don't just mean the writing advice you give to others, but the writing advice you embrace for yourself, that you kind of almost tell a myth about how you write books, or at least I did. And I'm proven wrong every time. And Wanderers really proved me wrong. Wanderers really broke any illusions I had about how I write books. But I started off writing games, pen and paper role-playing games. So from there, it was like, at that point, I was really writing toolkits for people to build their own narratives. It's like very much taking your ego out of it, but then writing a narrative is very much putting your ego into it. It's sort of being like, I have this story and you should read it. And so it's sort of a different shift for me.
I think for me, it was a strange process to go from being completely, what is the word? Sorry, it's been a long day. Unself-conscious with the writing, where I had no idea what I was doing. So I was doing it sheerly for the love of it, just for the joy of the writing and the storytelling, to becoming acutely aware of, oh, people are going to read this and they're going to have things to say about it. This will actually be published, and it becoming a job instead of a hobby. That was a big change in terms of my emotional relationship with the writing. And then, of course, the technical stuff I've learned over the years. But I think the biggest thing that has changed with my writing process is I do not put off the things that are difficult now, because I've learned that I have to do those in order to produce something I'm okay with and that's going to go out into the world. So whether that is actually sitting down and spending the time to think about a character's back history or the world building or the languages or whatever, is doing that work up front instead of just diving into the fun stuff of writing the story. Because doing that work up front will A, make the story better, and then B, save me the hassle of having to retrofit stuff after the fact, or worst case scenario, publish something and then go, darn it, I should have thought of that. I should have fixed that. I should have.
Yeah. It's
so
weird because if you learn, I mean, from what you're saying, it sounds like it's a similar thing. For me, it takes a while to figure out that a lot of writing isn't about writing. A lot of writing isn't just about, and like I said, you tell these stories about how you write and how you tell it. It's like, well, you got to write your 2,000 words a day, or you're going to sit down, button chair. And that's not wrong, but it's also not everything. In fact, it's almost like the tip of the iceberg. And there's so much sometimes just thinking.
Yeah, I don't know if you find this, but my experience
It
is
can be months.
yeah, if the world is figured out, the characters are figured out, the story is solid. Honestly, the writing goes really fast. The writing is not the issue. It's all those other pieces. And I don't get writer's block, but if the writing is going to be difficult, it's because there's a problem with one of those other areas.
Yes. Agreed. Yeah.
This is for Christopher. Why did you switch from YA to adult?
Well, good question. I never thought of the inheritance cycle as YA. I was writing the most mature adult story I could starting at 15, 16, 17. The fact that the main character was under 18 automatically made it YA. But the final book in that series, The Inheritance, could easily have been shelved in the adult section of the fantasy department. So for me, that's never even a question. It's just, what is the best way to tell the story I want to tell?
Oh, and it's fascinating too, because you first of all, I mean, arguably you were one of the earlier sort of pioneers in the YA space, because YA wasn't categorically a thing really until then, really roughly. The Fat and Twilight and some other books sort of kind of cemented that.
Harry Potter.
And then it's also, I don't know, how many other authors were YA as they wrote YA? That's an interesting. I don't even think
there are a couple. There are one or two, I think, younger authors, but and that was actually one of the things I ran into starting out, was I wasn't aware of anyone my age who'd written a book. And of course now I am, there certainly have been people my age who had written and published books, but without exposure to that, it was a huge doubt factor for me of, was this even possible? Was I trying to do something that there was some unseen reason I wasn't aware of that wouldn't make it possible?
Okay, this is a very controversial topic. What do you think of the new Star Wars trilogy?
Ooh.
Oh man,
Chuck, you want to tackle that one first?
Let's talk about Star Wars, Chuck.
I see a landmine. I'm just gonna jump on it.
I mean, we could debate the new Dune trailer instead.
Like,
if you
we
want.
could be here for 3 hours for Star Wars and then the Dune trailer, but
I'll try to keep it short. I mean, for the most part, I really liked it. There's so much that I love about those characters. I don't think they stuck the landing, and I feel like the final film, I watched it and I was like, this is really fun, and it's woo, and it was kind of and then when I was done, I sort of kind of forgot about it. I didn't think about it again, which is unusual because I have devoted a lot of my life to thinking about Star Wars. And so when I sort of came out of there and I was like, I have no real deep thoughts about it. I mean, I had a little bit, but then I haven't watched it since. I tried, and then the other thing that was sort of notable for me was my son, who is huge into Star Wars, hasn't really wanted to watch it again. He'll watch some of the other ones, but he's nah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, I know they had production challenges with Carrie Fisher's passing and stuff like that, which you can't fault them for that. They had to work with it. But for me, I agree they didn't stick the landing. And for me, the biggest problem is that this is, again, looking at it from a mythological, epic storytelling point of view. I have no idea what Rey's story was emotionally, ultimately. If I think about Luke's story, it's very easy to conceptualize emotionally. I mean, exactly what he went through, where he was going, what his arc was. And yes, there were Ewoks, but we can live with that. and with Rey,
love the Ewoks.
With Rey, I mean, I can sort of articulate it, but I don't feel it. It wasn't carried through the 3 films, and that's really I think its downfall. And honestly, that's true for most of the main characters. Finn's character, unfortunately, was kind of dropped. And
by the 3rd film, as John Boyega has recently come to sort of talk about, he feels like, I think correctly, that they were just he's just a guy now. Don't worry about him. Ooh.
Yeah, so there were a bunch of things like that.
There you go.
So.
Okay. All right. So for Christopher, what topics of science did you study for this when writing Sea of Stars?
Well, I mean, on sort of an engineering technological standpoint, there was a lot of stuff about spacecraft design, space stations, combat in space, warfare in space, what that might actually entail, futuristic, computers, biotech, that sort of thing. But the biggest thing, of course, was the physics. That physics was the focus for me for the most part. Because, I mean, honestly, that's where it all boils down to anyway. Unless you're looking at pure mathematics, but...
And this could be for both of you. For Christopher, how much time do you devote to your art, drawing, painting? And I know for Chuck, you do photography and you do other things.
Mhm.
How much time do you spend on those, I guess, hobbies or other things?
For me, it's like I just try to do it every day. It's not really about a time. Like my camera is with me all the time because I'm always like, "There's a bug. I want to take a picture of this weird bug," and then I take out the macro lens. It's mostly just like a curiosity thing. It's not even that I'm forcing myself to do it. It's just a thing I kind of want to do.
For me, it's pretty intermittent because the writing chews up so much time. So I do it when I put art into my books in order to force myself to take the time to do art. Otherwise, there just isn't time for me most days. I actually just started doing digital art in the past year or so, year and a half, and that has really transformed what I'm able to do in the time I have available. So I can actually sit down and paint, a landscape in a couple hours or an hour or two on my iPad in the Procreate app, which, if I were doing that with traditional media, would be a very long, involved process. So I love the art, but I also need a reason to do that. And stories give me a reason for whatever the piece happens to be. It's like, oh, today I'm doing a space station, or oh, today I'm doing a star map, or oh, today I'm going to do X, Y, Z.
Do you, in terms of art, do you have an art to your beard care? Because I can tell right now, even digitally, it's a good beard. I mean, it just has a good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, it's a very curly beard, and I'm a perfectionist, and those two things do not mesh well.
Do you use
but no,
a paste or like a magical unguent? Like, what do you?
Yeah, it's beard balm, and it's the heavy, it's the heavy stuff with the heavy wax in it. Because otherwise, I can't do anything with it.
Yeah, especially as it gets kind of crazy humid out, and then.
Exactly. So I beat it into submission every morning and curse at it, and then it finally does what I want it to do, and I don't touch it for the rest of the day.
That's fair. You let it have its time.
Yeah, and the reason I grew it was because I had to shave, so many days in a row when touring when I was younger, and my face does not like that. And of course, as being marketed as the younger author, it was kind of better to go without a beard. So as soon as I finished the Inheritance Cycle,
hello.
That's right. As soon as I finished the Inheritance Cycle, that was it. I was done shaving.
That's good.
Okay. I love in the comments, there was a lot of talk about Star Wars still. That's pretty funny.
Yeah,
I expect it. I'm surprised you're not talking about the Dune trailer more, but I'm not going to go
Or Mandalorian. We can talk Mandalorian.
Oh, Mandalorian. Okay.
Well, all I'll say on the Dune trailer is they've obviously put a ton of work into it, but I'm not sold yet. The music didn't work for me. I know why they used it, but the music didn't work for me. And darn it, I kind of miss the ornateness of the Lynch version.
The Lynch version I love the Lynch version.
Yeah, same.
It's so bizarre and Byzantine, but yeah.
And it really does feel epic in a way that most movies that try to feel epic fail.
Yeah, that's actually true. Yeah, an alien. Like it feels truly like an alien experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, this question is for both of you. What is your favorite non-human character in a book or series that you've read?
Ooh.
Non-human.
Well, I always enjoyed Kosh, and also
Kosh is good
from Babylon 5, but also
yeah.
I'm trying to remember the two ambassadors. It was wasn't Delenn, it was the other two. Jakar. I always loved Jakar.
And, what's his
Malari.
Malari, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
They're good. I don't know. What's the best Murderbot is good. I mean, you gotta love Murderbot. Martha Wells. I'll go with that. I'll go with Murderbot.
Actually, there's a character. I want to make sure I get the author's name correctly here. 1 second. James Allen Gardner, who wrote quite a few bits of science fiction. I don't see him talked about quite so much these days, but he wrote a character called Orr, who was just a delightful, interesting character. And she was made of glass or something approaching glass. And I always loved her.
Here. For both of you, what is the first or most influential science fiction fantasy work that you read growing up?
Mm.
Ooh,
Science fiction or fantasy?
ooh. I can name one of each. I read
Yeah.
the Lloyd Alexander Prydain Chronicles. They were very influential just because I read them like we would go to the beach and I would be like, no beach, just no ocean, just book. Shut up. Like no sun, no nothing, just book. And then as I got a little older, it was the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, which is both deep and shallow in all the best ways. And I say shallow not as a pejorative, but I mean, it was just goofy, sort of light, weird fun. And then it would suddenly hit you with some kind of deep, weird, squirrely business. And so good. And that actually has a lot of great non-human characters too.
On the fantasy side, I'd say for me it was the first real fantasy book I read was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then of course it was The Hobbit and Wizard of Earthsea. So one of those three. And then on the sci-fi side of things, the very first episode of Star Trek I saw was Next Generation, and it was I forget the name of the episode of it. It was Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra when the walls fell. Yes. And Picard and that alien trying to communicate and the language difficulties. And I was really young. I think I saw that when it actually first aired, and that made quite an impression.
Do you have a favorite Jane Austen novel?
Oh my gosh.
I do actually.
What's yours?
I'd say Sense and Sensibility,
Okay.
because my mother read it out loud to me when I was a teenager, and it is an enormously funny novel when read out loud to you, and I'm quite fond of it.
I found Emma to be the one that I liked the most. Jane Austen I had a very complicated relationship with, because the first professor I had who tried to teach her, I despised a lot. She was like it was just one of those things where we just didn't gel, and she also misspelled a lot of things, and it frustrated me because she was an English professor, and I was like, you should spell things right. And she taught it like it was a soap opera, not like what it was, and so I didn't approach it well, and I was like, I hate these books, I'm not reading them. And then it took me like after college to be like, all right, fine, I will do it. And then I did. I was like, okay, wait. I was reading them wrong. I think, I was just reading them wrong.
But for anyone who's watching this, please don't read your children David Copperfield, because as far as I'm concerned, that's a horror novel for children.
That's torture.
And is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars going to be a standalone book or a part of a series?
Well, it is a self-contained story, as I've said, but there will be more stories in the universe, and we will see a number of these characters again. So if that makes it a series, you can call it a series, but I'm not committing to it as a series, because psychologically that means that I'm locked in a way that I prefer not to be. So writers do all sorts of tricks to get themselves to write, so that's one of them for me.
Sorry, my cat just came in to participate. Okay. Oh my goodness. All right, so we're gonna go back to Star Wars very quickly. It says you both mentioned Star Wars. Do you have a favorite film? You can only choose one.
That's tough. That's so tough. It's tough.
I know.
Man, it's the thing where I know that Empire Strikes Back is the better film, but I like Return of the Jedi more, because I was just that sweet spot age when it hit me. That's when Star Wars, I liked Star Wars before that, but Star Wars it just hit me like the Millennium Falcon crashing on something with Return of the Jedi. And I'm a huge Ewok fan. They're eating stormtroopers. They're hitting them with rocks and eating them. And that's amazing. They were going to eat Luke and they were just going to eat them all. That's great.
That's right.
Yeah.
Eat them. Good little murder bears.
Boy, I'm actually torn between the first and second films. Original trilogy, so A New Hope
Of
and
course.
Empire Strikes Back. But I actually think I might say A New Hope and the movie that Rogue One could have been. How's that?
I'm
Mm.
with you on that one.
So, and the reason I say that with Rogue One is, I mean, they did a good job, and of course, you know, if you know the history of the production of that film,
Troubled.
it was troubled is the appropriate word. But I've watched a ridiculous number of films over my life, and a lot of like classic World War II thrillers and espionage movies and stuff. And there were elements of that in Rogue One that just I've seen that sort of thing done, and I know what it could have been, and that
Yeah.
knowing that got under my skin, and then I
Even
and then
the
I couldn't
initial trailers indicated a different film in there somewhere. Like there was
exactly.
a better film inside the current husk of Rogue One,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to see that movie a little more.
Well, and if anyone watches it again, I think you can actually see like the switch between essentially directors in the film, where we'll go from almost handheld style, you know, much more casual framing, and then we'll get these really classically framed cinematic shots, and it's just like you can tell we're bouncing between two different styles over the course of the film. So
agreed.
Okay, for both authors, has there been any discussion for a film or a TV series of Wanderers or To Sleep in a Sea of Stars?
Sir?
I hope to have some good news on that in the nearest future, but there's nothing I can say at the moment.
Yeah, in classic sense, yeah, it takes a while to sit on that kind of thing. We did finally, after like almost a year of me knowing the news, that we have a showrunner, Glenn Mazzara, who worked on The Shield and Walking Dead and the Dark Tower series that unfortunately didn't happen with Stephen King, but he was the showrunner for those, and so he's the showrunner for Wanderers. So Lionsgate partnered up. So we're not sold. We're not like airing anywhere yet, but we have a good shot. If ever we have a good shot, this is the good shot.
Oh, congratulations!
As I said,
Awesome.
it's nothing yet. It's all.
So,
It's just a good team.
How do you feel about the story being adapted for television versus, let's say, self-contained as a film?
I kind of wrote it for TV, not just for TV, but almost as TV. Like I was trying to study how seasons of television worked, and so I spaced the sort of the chunks of the book like seasons of television, and I was studying how like an episode will end, to get you to the next episode, and how seasons end to get you to the next season, and I really wanted that cut to be with Wanderers. So Glenn very kindly said, he's like, what do you need me for? We could just double space this thing and film it. I was like,
wow.
I know it's nonsense because he's already what I've seen, what he's done with the pilot script is leagues far and away what I could have conceived for TV, but it was a nice comment.
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of things writers, novelists can learn from some of the stuff they do in television. I mean, they have it down to such a science with pacing and, setting up cliffhangers, drawing the audience through. I remember when I watched a couple seasons of 24, actually, and put aside any like politics of the show, the pacing of that show, narrative drive is bar none some of the best I've ever seen. And they managed to do 24 episodes per season, which is huge.
I know.
And every single one ended on a cliffhanger.
Yeah. And you fell off that cliff into the next one.
Yeah.
Like, that was like when first binging really started for me, because I got the discs, the DVDs.
Yep,
just
same.
By season, you'd be like, just feed them into the drive. You're like, whatever. I gotta know what's happening next.
Yeah, and then you get like 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through the season, and they've had so many twists and turns and reversals. It's like you look back at the beginning in the season, you go, wait a minute, what did you guys just do? That's a bit far, but
you're just today 24
hours. Yeah, they should have had at least one episode where it was just Jack Bauer in the bathroom for the hour, and everyone's texting him and trying to get him. He's like, "I'm sorry, man, I really gotta go."
I ate a chalupa. It did not go well.
That's right.
Oh my goodness. Do you love the movie Willow?
Ooh.
I don't know if I love it because it's been a while. I can't comment on love. I liked it, but it's been a while. I have Disney Plus. I could watch it.
Well, I am a child of the 80s, but I didn't see it until I was quite a bit older. And I liked it for what it was, but what bothered me about it was what bothers me about a lot of fantasy films that are ostensibly in, a previous time or era or place, which is there are some sort of modern elements, dialogue and pacing and some other things that and delivery, and it just takes me out of the world. There are very few fantasy things where I can feel like I'm in the world, and so that was kind of something I had with Willow. But it's a fun film. If I'd seen it at 10 or 12 or 13, I would have loved it.
Okay.
Versus like Dragon Slayer, which is, again, sort of cheesy and corny and from the 80s, but it sort of commits to the feel of its environment.
Yeah, it does.
And our last question. So before social media and the internet, how did
When
you
we were all
find
happier.
right? How on earth did you find new books to read or find books that you were interested in?
Ooh.
Well, we went to the
How did you do it?
and we looked at books there. I mean, seriously, I
Yeah.
would spend hours
Yeah.
in bookstores. I would just
Yeah.
Doylestown. I went to Doylestown, honestly, as a kid, and that's where I found books. Borders was also a favorite. I liked Borders and Poor Little on the Curb for Borders.
Yeah, though I was very fortunate to have in this amazing used bookstore about an hour from me. It was called Vargo's. It's called Vargo's, and it's still running actually in Bozeman, Montana. But they moved. Yeah, well, John Vargo runs it, and unfortunately, they moved locations. But originally, they were in this tiny corner. It was right on the corner of a block, so this tiny corner slot, and the shop was so narrow, and they had all the bookcases back to back to form, these columns you could walk through, and it was like a forest of dark bookcases. And I probably spent days there cumulatively in my life, and I found Otherland by Tad Williams on the shelves there as a kid.
Yeah.
I found so many amazing books, and that's the thing. I actually don't find books as easily now if I'm browsing on some online store. You don't get recommended. Yeah, you don't make those unexpected discoveries.
No, so you just don't pick up a book. You're like, what is? Oh, hello, and then you're like, I'm gonna buy it. Then you would come out of there with a big stack of books. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you find something that's out of print in the U.S. and it was published in one print run in the U.K. back in the 70s, and no one's ever heard of it. And you get this book and you're going, what the heck is? Oh, this is amazing! And
I find some like weird Terry Pratchett that way. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So those little like Del Rey paperbacks or Bantam or something, and so
that's where I Foster first was Yeah,
I don't know if you've ever read The Book of the Dun Cow by Walter Wagron Jr.
No, I'm aware of it. No, I haven't.
Talking animal allegory, but a good one. And it was one of those things. Like I'd never heard of it, and I thought I'd decided to give it a chance. It was really good. I found Gormenghast same way. It was I was touring for the self-published edition of Aragon, and I was in Galveston, Houston, at an independent bookstore. And I found the third book in the series, and I had no idea what it was. I opened it up, and the prose was so strange and awesome and different that I bought it and got the rest of the books. I'm like, I just found a treasure, and no one knows of this. Of course, people did, but I didn't.
When I read Elric, it was that same kind of way from Moorcock. I was like, what is this?
Yeah,
I want it.
Yeah, give me more.
Yeah, so bookstores is the secret. Support them and go to them.
Yeah.
Thank you all for supporting this independent bookstore tonight for this event. I'd like to thank you both for being with us tonight. It was a lot of fun.
Sure was.
Read both of these books. It was a ton of fun. We have To Sleep in a Sea of Stars and Wanderers at the Doylestown Bookshop. If you would like another copy of this, or if you haven't read Wanderers yet, click the Buy the Books Here button on your screen, or visit us in store or at www.doylestownbookshop.com. Christopher, I'd like to wish you the best on the rest of your tour. Thank you for putting the work in to write this amazing book. And Chuck, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. And thanks, Christopher.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. Chuck, really, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.